Yesterday we're talking about what is your intuition? How do you know when to use it? How do you even know what it is? That's what we're chatting about today. So anyone want to kick it off? Because I think we all have our own ideas and thoughts around this. How about you, Anthony? What do you think intuition is? The pressure's on.
I actually had a realization there before that I was like, I've been using my intuition since forever, but I'd never labeled it as that. And I think a lot of people actually do that as well without realizing it. Like, we often hear phrases like, you have a good judge character, or, oh, that was good timing, you know, whatever it is. But it's only in recent years I realized that all of those phrases are simply people using their intuition, like, to their own benefit. And it's exactly what I've been doing all this time. But rather than people saying, I've got intuition, you instead think and like hear people saying, I'm a good judge character, or I'm very lucky, or whatever.
Yeah.
And as for developing my intuition, then I think that's an ongoing process. Like, it's pretty much like life. And no doubt Carol, as the teacher, would probably speak to having to trust your intuition.
Oh, are
which
you
is
intuiting that?
literally...
You know, that's what I'm going to speak on. Just for that, I'm actually not going to speak about that.
Good. Well, you'll have to go and find something else. So.
Well, I was like you, except I knew from an early age, I knew that I was using intuition, and being somebody who's of a certain generation, I called it ESP. That's what they called it at the time, extrasensory perception. But I knew as a child, I knew I had that, and I had figured out how to use that in school. So I don't know how smart I am or anything, but I sure did well in school because I definitely used it for multiple choice tests and what's the teacher going to say next and things like that.
I wasted it.
You wasted it if you didn't use it that way. But I very early got used to taking a moment to pause and go, what feels like the right answer, without necessarily even reading the choices, let's say. And then that did translate over into other things, and especially in relationships too. Is this person somebody I'm going to like? Is this somebody I want to meet and hang out with, etc.? So I used it in a variety of ways, actually, all through life, as far back as I can remember anyway. But as far as defining what it is, I just think of it as that little inner knowing, and sometimes even an inner voice telling me, like, you should go right instead of left. There might be a traffic jam off to the left, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's pretty similar for me. I didn't know what it was called either, but for me, it was survival. It's like just my childhood and upbringing. I used it a lot for survival. And I feel like that's the only time I really noticed I was using it up until I got older. And then I would sense it about other adults, like danger signals and things like that. But I think we all utilize our intuition on a daily basis, and not a whole lot of people don't even know that that's what they're doing. But it is like a skill that we all have, that we all should foster and build up, because I feel like we live in this world where everything is what's tangible and what you do and what you show people. But when you really learn to recognize your own intuition, and some say listen to your gut, that could be the similar thing, like it's your gut feeling. Or like if you walk into a room and you could feel people just had an argument, or you're not feeling safe, or whatever it is. Like, there are so many stories from people who aren't doing woo-woo things, let's say, that are like, well, I just had this feeling and I knew I should have done this. Or they make a decision and they knew better, and they'll reflect on it like, I knew that I should have did something different. So I think as we reflect on our lives and recognize those things, we can call all of those things intuition. And that kind of leads into being psychic. That's just another word for intuition. That you use to kind of tap into other people's energy, I feel, or things' energy, or room's energy. But intuition is super helpful. I know it's saved my butt more than a few times. And doing this work now, it's been really good to kind of just explore it in more fun ways, to kind of build those skills, because it does help you then on the more serious end of things in your life as well. Well, for sure. People use it. Again, I want to go back to relationships. People are using it without necessarily recognizing that they're using it. And we're all pretty good at it because if you think about it, your children, your spouse, your partner, your best friend, your sister, people you're very close to, you instinctively and intuitively know how they're feeling just even by the sound of their voice.
Yeah.
So they call or they walk in the door, they say hello, you say what's wrong, because you hear it, you know it, you feel it, you sense it with them. So we are using it to everybody on a regular basis. So if you acknowledge yourself doing that, then you can know that you can use your intuition for any situation and other things too. And perhaps in the workplace, should I make this proposal? Or will I get promoted? Should I say something to my boss? You can use it there too. You can use it in any situation. At which checkout line should I get in is one of my favorites to play because I don't want to stand in the longer line. And so I'll use my intuition to feel like which line is going to get me through the fastest. And the more you get used to giving yourself little things like that to be aware of, the even better you get at using your intuition because you're practicing it. You're getting used to feeling that kind of gut feeling that you're talking about and understanding that you can use it in so many ways.
Yeah.
Did I just go down a rabbit hole?
No, keep going. I used to label it actually gut feeling rather than intuition, like you said. So I think growing up, you'd say, oh, I had a gut feeling on that situation, that person, that whatever it was. But of course, that was me just using my intuition without labeling it as such. And funny enough, Carol, when you were on about the cue, I was thinking there randomly before that you could also tie it in with manifesting and intuition. So in other words, like let's say you want a parking space, you're going shopping, you almost set out that intention to manifest it, but then your intuition plays a part along the way. Suddenly you're driving somewhere and, I get the feeling, turn left. Like that's using your intuition and then you end up with your result, which was the car park space. So it's almost like you manifested it, but you intuited, is that the right word? Your way along to the goal, to the prize.
Well, it's about awareness for sure, but just becoming aware of that gut feeling, that intuition, that psychic skill that you have. And I feel like if something is manifesting or not, you feel that too. So sure, it does go hand in hand because you can manifest things on the other side of it. They're not always positive.
Let's talk about, I know like a lot of people who are kind of stepping into their spirituality in whatever sense makes sense for them. The one thing that is a common question or wondering is like, how do I know this is my intuition and not something else? Because I feel like even things that I'm like emotionally close to, it's harder. It can be harder to discern what is my intuition and what is my bias, and I think that's a human trait. And so I'd like to talk about one or two ways to know the difference or ideas so people can learn for themselves, like what the difference is and how to recognize that. I know for me, intuition or psychic knowing or gut feeling, there's no emotion tied to it. It's almost quieter, but I know that if my emotions are really ramped up, that is likely not what I'm intuiting. It's just a calm. It's a calm with it. Signifies for me that that's my intuition. Doesn't mean I always like what I'm getting or feeling or knowing, but even in reflection, like later down the road in my life, like especially now doing what I do, as a business and helping people, I'm like, yeah, I did know it and I still did that, right? So I think you can hone your intuition as a normal everyday person by recognizing what feelings are attached to this. Like, do you have a skin in the game on this? Because I feel like that clouds a lot of people's intuition. And I see a lot of, especially on social media, my intuition's telling me this or that. But it's also you could tell when it's tied to the person's bias or emotional thing going on. So I think it'd be helpful to kind of discuss that end of it so people themselves can try to discern for themselves what is intuition and what is your anxiety,
Yeah. So for me, you talked about the emotions, and for sure it's harder for me to pay attention to my intuition when I'm in a heightened state of emotions. positive or negative, either way, if there's something around it and I want a certain outcome, I'm certainly not unbiased with it because I want it to go my way. So I have to look at, is it coming from my emotions or is it coming from my brain? So I have to kind of separate it out that way. So it's the calm, like you talked about. If the brain is not involved, or the emotions are not overly involved, then it is a pretty easy understanding that I have of, oh, yes, this is how it's supposed to be, or this is what I am feeling. But if there is too much overthinking or too much emotion, then for sure I can't trust it at that moment. I have to step away from it and come back to it. And then my third option is call my intuitive friends.
Yeah,
and say,
call a friend. Call a friend.
What do you feel about this?
Yeah, I know. The overthinking, when you said overthinking, I was like, oh yeah, I'm like the queen of that. And like all the alarm bells go off like, you're overthinking like the
Exactly.
Call Carol, that.
Exactly. And how many times have the three of us done that for each other? For sure.
Yeah,
so it is helpful to know some intuitive friends, but that's just like asking your friend, maybe they don't do psychic reading for a living, but you have friends who can help you with that, who also have their own intuition they can use. So you can still phone a friend if you feel like you're too much into it.
But you're very aware, let's say the two of you, and even in another episode they were talking about, you being aware as children of spirit and everything. So like for the average Joe or myself, anytime I think of intuition, for me, it's like, it's a learning curve on trying to determine when it's me and when it's not me. In other words, like, let's say it's that sixth sense, it's my intuition, when that is kind of giving me signals, or else when my other worldly senses actually are, taking over. And then you like to say that it's intuition, but it's not.
Yeah.
I think it can be very hard to distinguish between them. And then on top of that, you have to trust. And then you trust your intuition, let's say in a scenario or in a situation, and it mightn't turn out to be right. And then that can seed doubt into people's minds. And then they say, oh, yeah, do you know what? Intuition, that's maybe a bit of horseshit.
Yeah.
But you have to go back to that situation and look at it objectively. And how was I feeling at that time when I made that decision? And was I truly feeling the energy around that? Or was I overthinking that? Because we're all the kings and queens of overthinking in this room right now with us. And I know that we can all stew on things a good bit. And that's our way of knowing. We all have talked about that. We know we're not using our intuition when we're stewing in something, when we're thinking about it way too much. And it's causing that emotional turmoil. So we can't trust it there. So you have to go back and look at the situation. Was I doing any of that in the moment? Is that why I can't trust it? Because I wasn't fully being objective. So you have to look at it that way too.
I think that's a good sign, the stewing, because a recommendation for living is to be present, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're present, you're technically not focused on the past or the future. You're living in the moment. You're being present. And where does your intuition happen the most? But usually when you're very much present. So if you're stewing, you tend to be focusing on the past or the future. So just to kind of put it into a self-development narrative, working on being present always looked as being good for your intuition.
Yeah, I also think like when you're in that space emotionally where you're not able to get out of it, that sounds like really good on a greeting card. But in everyday reality, when people are trying to actively be present and stuff, like I think one tool that could be helpful, just speaking from my own experience, to try to decide if you're using your intuition correctly, is you can take like Post-it notes and write questions on your Post-it note. And then you can sit and either, fold them up so you can't see the question. Like, let's say, oh, am I going to get a job? Oh, am I going to break up with the boyfriend? Like, make 5 different questions. Oh, am I going to have a great dinner tonight? Like, whatever it is. And then sit down a few minutes and just pull up the number. Don't look at the question, and then sit quietly and write down whatever impressions you feel coming in. And then you can kind of check yourself. Or if you use cards, if you are woo-woo and you have cards, you could use those to kind of sort it out when you are emotionally tied to things. And that will bring you back to the present. And sometimes you'll be like, I don't like that card. I'm throwing it away. But I do think like what Carol said, reflecting on like maybe when you thought it was your intuition, but it wasn't, and now you're reflecting on how can I look at that differently and what emotions were tied to that, you're just going to continue to build it. But there are workarounds to get over yourself because, we're human and we all want what we want, and that's okay too. But there are ways to kind of foster it and to bring your being present back down to the moment you're in. And so I like that you mentioned that as well.
Well, I started to giggle when you said, "Oh, one of your questions can be, will I have a good dinner?" but that's exactly the kind of question you can train yourself with, because you're not tied to it emotionally. It's not going to change your life in any kind of way. So if you are wanting to practice honing that skill, I think you write down some of those kind of general questions that aren't going to matter either way, so that you can be very objective about it. And it can even be things like, will it rain at all tomorrow? So are you really tied to that at all? Unless you're getting married, maybe not, in an outdoor wedding. So things like that. And even it's a game I love to play with my friends too, of intuiting what they are having for dinner. I have one friend in particular who accuses me of having cameras in her house because I do it when she's having for dinner. But it's just a fun little way that I practice using my intuition. Do you guys have any other fun ways to practice? Sorry.
That's just like Carol last week, forever the teacher. I was bored off my head on the bus talking to her, and she was like, "Sure, why don't you intuit there who's getting on the bus or who's getting off the bus?" And I was like, "You've come up with something to do for anything."
I can.
I was like, "Oh Christ, I'm on a bus now. There'll be nothing to do, and I can say it. I'm bored." And then she's like, "No, she'll still come up with a task or an activity or something to do."
You will. You'll get homework from me for sure.
And it's like forever the teacher comes out in her.
But it is fun. To me, it's fun to do those things. Like I do it all day long, really. And especially, and I've got my husband to doing it with me too when we're watching a program or something. So if it's a competition kind of show, for sure, we both have to say right at the beginning of the show, who do you think's going to win? And I've gotten him to play along with that too, because now it's a competition between us. Who's going to pick the winner? Yeah. So things like that, I just find so fun. But if I'm bored driving along, I'll do the same thing. Like I'll intuit, oh, what color car will be in front of me at the next stoplight? Or what is that driver in front of me? I'll pass them and intuit like, oh, is that male or female or younger or older? Something like that, just to keep the intuition sparks flying, I guess.
And Tracy, you said fun things as well. Do you do the same as what Carla's on about there?
Yeah. Well, so funny because just randomly I'll get little like random things that I don't even care about. And I'll be like watching a show, be like, oh, that and that's going to happen. And it does. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And then I try to remember, like, how did I know that? Or what was the marker for myself of knowing when I was in that mental area to access that information? I don't know. So I don't pointedly do it. I do if I'm like in my head about something I'm emotionally tied to, then I'll do write the stuff down on a thing and check myself. And then I do just on a rebellious thing, like I'll know my intuition is telling me something. I'll be like, but I can prove that it'll be fine if I do X, Y, or Z anyway. And then I'm like, 2 months down the road, I'm like, well, shit. I should have listened, So, yeah, all kinds of fun.
I want to point out, Tracy, it sounds like when you have, I call them drop-ins, when you just know something out of the blue, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you had that. What you're talking about is you're watching TV, so you weren't really thinking about anything else.
Right.
So there's that element of not overthinking.
Yeah.
But also you're not emotionally tied to that TV program. And also it's something routine and mundane. And so I feel like this is something everybody who's listening can pay attention to. When you're driving to work or you're driving your kids to school or somewhere very familiar and it's routine, you often kind of wander off to that daydream, then you end up at your job and you go, wait, how did I get here? I don't remember driving here. But times when it's routine are when you are kind of open to receiving those drop-in bits of intuition.
Yeah.
So that's a good time.
I get the best ones when I'm curling my hair. Like anytime I actually sit and curl my hair, I get the best intuitive downloads on things. I'm like, I gotta brush my hair more, I think.
All right, so when I'm looking for advice in the future, I'll be like, just text me, Tracy, when you're curling your hair later, and I'll give you
Yeah.
a buzz on the phone then, because you literally get golden
Yeah,
advice
Yeah.
from her at that
that's
stage.
right. You start charging, she can put up a sign. I'm curling my hair now. Who
Yeah.
wants advice? Yeah, or even doing things like, for me, loading the dishwasher is something I don't like to do. So I just let my mind wander with that, and I'll get some good drop-ins there as well.
I
Mhm.
think what will turn a lot of people off is, let's say, hits or misses, right? We'll call it that
Yeah.
for right and wrongs. But like when you get misses, then it's, doubt starts coming in. And even take the one the other day. So we'll use me as an example on the bus. Let's say I got rid of you on the phone, and then I was, right, I'll actually do it just because I'm bored. So I was like, let's see who's going to come on next. And for some reason, I felt like they would have bleach blonde hair, but there was something off about it that I couldn't put my finger on. And then we went to the next stop, and a lady got on with a scarf that was literally kind of blonde but wrapped around her head. My God, Jesus, like that was the color, but I just couldn't figure out what it was. But it was material, let's say, rather than hair, right? And then, of course, because I was getting it right, I got it right the first time, and now I was trying to determine how many people were going to show up the next stop, and then I got it into my head. And then I went to the next stop, and I think I had a feeling for 3, and like 4 got on. And I was like, fair. So it's fine. Like I'll play with it in that sense, and I'm used to the no's, like in as you do, or the fails, or whatever. But that is disheartening, and I think
Yeah.
people can get frustrated with it, or turned off, or think that their intuition isn't good, or that someone else has better intuition than them. And I don't believe that. I believe that everyone obviously is intuitive, and it's just a matter of learning how to use
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Because 4 is not far off from 3. So to me, you take the win of, I was close because I didn't say 12 people were getting on the bus. I said 3, so.
Oh, Christ, if there was 12, we would have been at that stop for ages.
But I'm just saying, like, you can't beat yourself up about it just because you're a little bit off. It's a practice. It's something you do, hone that skill,
Yeah.
just like with any other skill. So
Mhm.
again, you weren't far off, and you got to take that as going, okay, well, now I can learn from that, going, I was close, but next time I will see if I could be even closer.
Or if there's a pattern where it's always really the answer is -1.
Yes. That
Yeah.
could be a thing. Or did I always get the opposite? Because if you always get the opposite of something, let's say, if you're trying to decide if something's black or white, and you say white, and when you say white, it's always black, then you say, all right, I need to mix up the order of the way I'm feeling it. It's not white, it's black. So I need to just start saying, when I get that feeling, it means black. Don't all stare at me at once.
No, I'm used to you saying that. She always gives examples like that. Feel the difference or spot the pattern.
It's good advice, Anthony.
It is. No, it is. I second that advice.
I think we just all have to remember that it's like anything else. You have to cultivate it and kind of just keep working with it. You don't learn to, just like you don't learn to drive a car overnight. You got to learn all the checks and balances. You got to just keep building on it, build that muscle.
I like the word cultivating it because it reminds me of growing seeds, watering the seeds and providing the sun and providing the soil for them. That's just what I mean by, practicing with it, is you do have to have some care around it for yourself.
Yeah.
Do you both believe that it is, let's say, a sense, a sixth sense or whatever, that everybody has?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just when someone says, I have no intuition, I'm like, oh, don't bring me down that rabbit hole, please.
Because it's if we go back to the word gut feeling we were
everyone
talking
has that
earlier,
and they've experience of it.
but everybody feels. Like, you can't not feel, which is one of your recognized 5 senses, right? Seeing, hearing, touch, taste, and all that. So feeling, touch, you everybody has that. So if you have that physical touch, why can't you have that internal touch, that internal feeling? You do have it.
Sometimes it's just a knowing. Like, I feel like everybody cultivates it differently within themselves. Some people have just like a knowing. Some people get like a bodily sensation. Some people will hear things, smell things. But as a human, we all have some sort of intuition. I think that we've just been, for it's been not recognized as important for very long in culture and in the way humans have been the last however many years. And I think that's just now coming back to recognizing that's important. We have even scientists talking about consciousness and tapping into your inner self. Like a lot of that's been getting more acknowledged every year. And so I think just a lot of it's just been dormant because we're just go, 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 do, whatever. But everybody has it. Just how it plays out for everybody is a little differently. That's my thought anyway.
Well, it's interesting. You said go, go, go. Everyone's busy, busy, busy. And then both of you said earlier on that your best drop-ins are when you're not in that state.
Yeah.
It's when you're chilled out or you're doing something mundane or in that daydreamy time, basically not running around after chickens or dogs.
Right. Because that's the brain. We're thinking, what are the next tasks? Where do I have to be? And we're not taking the time to pause and have that little moment of silence, or if you will. I like that, Tracy, you were talking about the physical manifestations of those gut feelings, knowing being one of them, those drop-ins. But there's going to be times when like your hair stands on end. Do you ever have that feeling?
Yeah.
Or this buzziness around your head or ears? I mean, those are some physical things that are commonly reported. I feel from people who are just, I know something's there. I feel it, because you're really literally feeling energy around you at that time, which is why it feels like static in your hair, ringing in your ears, things like that. So goosebumps also, a lot of people get that. So just think about that for yourselves and anyone who's listening, if maybe you have gut intuition in that way.
I also think whatever, everybody's different in what makes them happy or what gives them joy. And if you're really I feel like intuition plays a lot into that too, because if you ever notice, if you're doing something you really love and it just feels easy and you don't even have to really, it feels natural to you and you just do whatever it is and you get really into it. And I feel like your intuition is partially leading you in that, because it's natural to you in that way to build on that spidey senses about just knowing how to do it right, because it comes so easy to you. Those are a little less obvious ways of your intuition. I feel like that's part of that too. Maybe that's a little obscure, but you know me, guys.
Oh, we all know spidey senses. Surely we do.
Actually, Carol, being forever the teacher, why should people develop their intuition?
Well, I feel like it gives us a lot of security in our lives to realize that we can trust ourselves or not.
Yeah.
But you figure out if you can trust yourself. And it helps in your decision making, right? I know that I can look at this myself. I don't have to rely on somebody else to help me figure things out. Or should I take that job? Or is this the right guy for me? It's another way to get more information, really, about decisions that you are already having to make, by knowing that there's something around me that I know internally that I can pay attention to and give me more information in making a decision about certain situations. So I think it's very useful from the small things in life to the larger things in life.
Yeah, also it's a way to help build your own confidence in yourself. I think that's sort of what you're saying as well, Carol. There's so much noise in the world, and as people, we're just being human, you're affected by whatever's going on, or maybe people in your close circle. And the more you can cultivate your intuition to knowing who you are and what's right for you, the more confidence it gives you to make decisions in your life and to just really thrive and grow and learn. And then that at some point just helps you to have space for others around you as well. It's a really great thing to cultivate.
It's a navigation system, internal GPS.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
And especially for those people who, like Tracy mentioned earlier, are always saying, I knew I should have done that. I knew it should have gone that way. If you are someone who says that, then you are having these gut feelings that you're not quite paying attention to. So you really want to start paying attention to. If you knew it, then follow it. Try that.
as soon as you go there now, I'll be running to get sticky notes because of what Tracy said a while ago. And I'll put all my questions down, and then I'll feel and get the impressions. And what'll happen, Tracy? I won't like the bloody impression.
Yeah.
So then I'll know that I'm using my
Yeah.
intuition.
It's a good way to measure and to like help yourself navigate when you can even go, oh, that's how I feel when I know it's not even right or whatever. But like Carol said, put some dumb questions in there, like, oh, what am I having for dinner? And like throw a few zingers in there, you know, like
Spice up the day.
spice it up.
So, any final words? Play with it like a child. Be curious.
Yes, be curious. Play with it. Yeah, sure. Have fun with it. I mean, we gave some ideas earlier of just silly little ways that you can tap into your intuition, but there's a million things that you can do with it. And if you really want to go even farther with it, you get it with a friend and say, hide something around your house. Let me sense what you hid or where it is or anything like that. You can have somebody help you play along and kind of have fun doing that together, or hold something in your hand and say, guess what I'm holding? What do you feel about that? That's a fun one too. So there's lots of things you can do.
So I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm really glad we dove in. I feel like we could talk many more hours, but overall, I think we covered a lot of bases and hope it was helpful for everybody. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Long.